welcome everyone to the 30th episode of Smash TV. Yes. 30. Amazing, isn't it? It was only a little while ago when I said we had 25 episodes. Man, I really must watch less movies. But what am I going to do if I do that? Travel, party, poppycock, movies, and hot women in pools, of course, 'cause I'm such a player. Cannibal is a Belgian movie about, you guessed it, a cannibal. We meet a young man who stumbles upon an unconscious, bloody and distressed woman in the forest. He does what any sane person does and takes her home, after which he discovers that she is quite the looker. Of course, things start to blossom between the two, but they quickly realize that this beautiful creature, played by Helena Copjans, has desires that are out of his capabilities. Or are they? Cannibal is a simple indie movie much in the vein of Raw, about people eating human flesh and how much this resembles Love and Passion. It's fairly predictable how the movie will progress, and it's not hard to imagine how the movie will end, but you will have some enjoyable time watching the movie unfold itself, if only due to the mysterious main character that is portrayed by Copjans. Don't expect too much from this movie. If you liked Raw, you'll probably like this one as well, though I must admit that Raw, that is a cameo by Copjans, is the superior movie of the two. Check that. Star of David. Beauty Hunting, also known as Beautiful Girl Hunter, is the story of a sick young man who has become obsessed with rape and the Holocaust after seeing his mother be brutally raped by an unknown man and subsequently beaten and abused by his supposed father. He decides to kidnap women resembling his mother and lock them up in his fancy dungeon, where he, you guessed it, rapes and abuses them. Things get a little bit more icky when he kidnaps a famous TV star, and it only gets more dicey from there on out. The Star of David part of the title was probably removed cause his interest to the Holocaust was probably just thrown in for shock value. Only one scene in the movie makes allusions to what happened then, and it's merely used to show the extent of his perversion, which, for any sane person, should already be obvious. It is also quite ironic to see the Holocaust portrayed when Japan itself had some very nasty things happen during and before World War II, involving torture, genocide and testing. Beautiful Girl Hunter is a much more fitting title in my opinion, as the girls portrayed in this movie are all pretty beautiful. There's plenty of nice Asian boobies to be shown and some extraordinary ultra zoom shots on very white pantsuit, glorious white pantsuit zoom. There's the typical Japanese sounds, bondage, some light rope bondage and kinbaku, and even some toilet play and torture if you're into that stuff. This movie, regardless of some weird stuff in it, is quite enjoyable, to be honest. There's some semblance of a story and character development, and the scenes are done fairly tastefully, except for that one scene with the book, but that again was shock value. Anyways, check this out if you're not the Puritan and squeamish type and love yourself some Japanese schlock. Check that. Old Henry is a western about an old guy called Henry who is just living his life the best he can while working on the farm with his son somewhere in the wild, wild west, until that fateful day when he discovers a wounded man on his land who has a satchel with a lot of money in it. Wounded men, a bag full of money, that's bound to bring trouble, right? And so it does, especially when three strange men arrive that don't quite look right. Old Henry is a typical modern western story about hard men, grit and the tough life in the American West. Every scene is tight as you see a man reluctant against violence be confronted with those who do not shy from it. A father and son story about growing up, the past and the future. And all this in the glorious Western style I've always been fond of, the lawless land where a code is often all you have. Old Henry is a must-see for all fans of Westerns and people who enjoy such classics as The Unforgiven, True Grit and Tombstone. Granted, Old Henry isn't as great as those three, but it definitely is a good Western movie and you'd be amiss if you didn't see it. Smash that. Sci-fi movies are quite the special breed of films, and so is Morlocks. Cheesy, low-budget and often ridiculous Morlocks presents you with the worst movie titles I've ever seen, and presents you with a story that is part Stargate, part aliens and part sliders. In Morlocks, an experimental time machine goes wrong, unleashing some strange creatures called Morlocks upon our world. A team is sent out to find the solution to the problem by traveling through the portal. If only hubris and power didn't screw up things, am I right? Morlocks is based on the ancient tale by H.G. Wells for his 1895 novel, The Time Machine, and if you don't know that story, then I'll avoid mentioning the plot twist of the movie. It's not a big deal, but still, I would not wish to ruin your enjoyment of this extremely cliché copyright, badly acted, low budget, often boring sci-fi movie that probably wouldn't even be released on VHS if that still existed. It has Robert Picardo playing Robert Picardo, and the rest are people I've never heard of, and probably with reason. Morlocks is only for those who enjoy the awfulness that is sci-fi movies but don't expect anything is so bad that it's good, like Sharknado or others. Drop that. Largo Winch is a popular Belgian comic, correctly called Band Disney, which roughly translates as drawn strip, created by Philippe Frank and Jean Van Ham, about a kid called Largo Winch who gets adopted by a rich man in order for him to take over his company and billions. Of course, there are jackals on the prowl who try to take the company for themselves by any means necessary, and Largo, being the type of guy he is, won't let them get away with it without a fight. Sounds interesting, right? Well, maybe a little. Unfortunately, the movie is all but exciting, and this, to me, was mainly due to the main actor, who has zero emotion and charm. He delivers all his lines the same way, and his facial expressions are almost non-existent, often appearing as some kind of Mary Sue who gets out without a scratch. The action falls flat, and the stakes seem a little bit middle of the road, even though we're dealing with a billionaire who inherits everything. See, if I became a billionaire, I'd have fast cars, choppers, guns, bunkers, hot bikini babes around my pool serving me cocktails. This guy, at least in the movie, does not. If Largo Winch is this lame in the comic as well, I'm glad I've never read it, and if I look at the synopsis of the 22 comics released, it's all pretty much the same story. Needless to say, Largo Winch didn't capture my attention nor excitement, and that's a sad thing, cause I am of course a Belgian myself. Maybe the sequel is a bit better, I'll tell you later. Drop that. In The Unforgivable, Sandra Bullock plays a woman who just spent 20 years in prison for killing a cop. She attempts to bring her life back in order, but the guilt and price of her past crime haunts her at every corner. Things don't become easier for her when she isn't allowed to find her young sister, and when the sons of the victim stalk her to deal out some justice. The Unforgivable is a cold hard drama about the price of being punished and what happens when people get out. There's an interesting plot twist that makes this even more unbearable, and I found myself a wee bit teary at one point in the movie. Granted, I'm a bit on the edge lately, but the story does a good job of having compassion with all the parties involved. It has some good extra actors like Vincent D'Onofrio and John Bernthal, who always deliver their best, but the true star of the movie is of course none other than Sandra Bullock, who excellently portrays a person who has been incarcerated for 20 years and been through some stuff while inside and outside. She's a tough cookie, but even the toughest cookies will succumb to the pressure of emotions and family. The Unforgivable movie is definitely a recommendation for me, and I think this is a great movie to watch with your missus who wants to see some drama on screen. Smash that. Antlers is a horror movie about a teacher in a school that has a student that's a little bit on the weird side. He shows all the signs of being abused and has to endure bullying on an almost daily basis. And those creepy bloody drawings don't help either, so we're all quite sure that something is going to happen. And we'll find out, but there's more to the story than this. You'll have to find out what Antlers have to do with it though. Antlers is a very muted, dark story with some paranormal aspects, and reminded me a little bit of The Ritual, where an ancient beast stalks our characters and all kinds of pagan stuff is happening. Unfortunately, this movie takes a detour somewhere and it becomes a simple Hollywood romp with a predictable open ending to boot. Kerry Russell as always is a sight to behold, but I felt that certain scenes at the end did her character injustice. Check that. Oi, Fancy another one of them British crime movies with very British people doing very bad things? Well, this is the real-life story of Tony Tucker, Patrick Tate and Craig Rolfe, and how they became some of the most prolific dealers and criminals in the south of England. We have plenty of flashbacks on how they came to rise and plenty of scenes where they are showing what kind of delightful people they are. Violence, extortion, sex and all kinds of deals are present and reveal the seedy underbelly of the crime world in a less than flattering way. These aren't the romanticized criminals from most movies, these are pretty much pure scum. Well, at least some of them are. Bonded by Blood is an enjoyable crime movie that will keep you engaged for its run time. The final scene with obligatory white on black text adds to the fact that this is based on real-life situations, though I'm sure many of the scenes are fictionalized for your enjoyment. It has its funny moments, so it's not all doom, gloom and murder though. All in all, a good crime story with some nice so British scumbag actors. Check that. 19 Doors is an indie movie about a woman who decides to write a horror story in a haunted abode. Yes, an adobe. It's something different than a house, I guess, right? Anyways, this woman almost immediately sees strange stuff and well, it's pretty bad. The movie that is. Not what is happening, cause what is happening is quite hilarious. She gets scared many times by people, or entities, that are within eyesight, but for some reason she only yells when they loudly speak or touch her. I mean, woman, the guy was almost right in front of you. Did you not see him? And then there's the people only she sees, the ghosts, or whatever they are, that are just there as normal people with some strange makeup on, cause ya know, this is a low-budget movie and we can't afford special effects. Hell, we can't even afford good lighting or anything else to make a decent-looking movie, but hey, at least we try. But the acting, if you can call it that, is yet amateur drama class level at best, and it of course brings down the movie even more. 19 Doors has a story, but I was so bored that I forgot what the 19 Doors thing was all about, besides the fact that there are 19 doors. Very interesting. Yes. Anyways, if you want to see a movie that shows you why many indie movies fail, then this is the movie for you to see. I applaud them for trying though, since you can't make a timeless classic without failing a couple of times, but you need a good script to start with, and this did not have a good script. I have seen worse films than this, however, so if you're curious, give it a look, but only if you're really curious. Drop that. Speaking of the Devil, aka Unpeed in Paradiso, aka Standing in Paradise, is a 1991 movie with the one and only Bud Spencer, where he plays a cab driver whose cab company is threatened to be bought up and dismantled by a greedy corporation. He is beset by a very seductive demoness played by Carol Alt and a nerdy bumbling angel who attempt to bring him over to their side for some reason or the other. And then there's something about a lottery ticket. As they both plan to bring Bud over to their side, all kinds of comedic things happen, although not as comedic as some other of Spencer's movies. The role of the angel was originally meant to be played by Terence Hill, but he had to refuse since he was doing the Lucky Luke TV show at the time. Having Terence Hill in that role would have probably made this movie infinitely better, since the dynamic duo would again be together on the screen. Jerry Lermit, however, does an okay job, but he does not have the charisma Hill would have added to the movie and would have played off much better with the scarlet-dressed vixen that Carol Alt plays. And whoa, does she look amazing in her often revealing outfits and red lipstick. Speaking of The Devil is a fun and wholesome movie that doesn't have enough of the Bud Spencer tropes to make it a real Bud and Terence Hill movie. There's only minor slaps and even lesbians, but for fans of Bud Spencer, this is just a delightful little film. There's nothing much to it, and there are better Bud Spencer films, but it's just fun and wholesome, and goddamn Carol Alt looks amazing. Check that. And that was the 30th episode. Wasn't it great? Some nice movies in there, weren't they? What? You don't know? Well, find out for yourself and find out. Don't just take my word for it. I just tell you what I think you should smash, check or drop.